Good morning, everybody. It is Wednesday, January 14th, and this is our morning drive live. So, you may have noticed I am not driving today because number one, my new car is getting its state inspection and emissions, and wasn't in the car to be able to do it this morning. Number two, I needed my screens here so that I am able to cover all of the information that we are going to talk about today. Um, because today's topic is the notice of privacy practices. And this is a big thing. There was a post last night. I did a video back in December, the beginning of December, about this. And then I guess the compliance video that I did on Friday, because it was our HIPAA training day in our office, that video spurred more discussion about it. And then there was a post last night about it that kind of went a little crazy because people don't understand. So there are a few changes for 2026 on basically what your notice of privacy practices and your written HIPAA plans have to entail. This means your written HIPAA plans have to change, and your annual team training that we talked about on Friday has to be redone to include these plan changes. If you haven't, and here's the problem, all these new rules that are kicking in on February 16th, 1 month from now, actually got signed into law in 2024. So if you didn't know about them, it's been since 2024. It's not like they're springing it on us on January 1st that this has to be done by February 16th. These laws were actually signed by Biden in 2024. So it's not a new thing. It's not something that was unexpected. Um, we knew this was coming. So let me just do this. Hopefully everybody is there. But I want to talk about what this is. First of all, let's talk about the notice of privacy practices. The notice of privacy practices is your notice to your patients on how you will protect their information. Every office has to have one. Every covered entity has to have one. And it gives the patient the information on how your office handles and deals with their personal information. It includes a patient bill of rights. There's a whole bunch of other things. There has to be a marketing statement in there talking about how you will use their information for marketing purposes to try and sell them things, giving them the opportunity to opt out of that. Because you could say in your notice of privacy practices that you will email your patients about promotions. Let's say you're doing a whitening promotion. We're going to do a Zoom promotion, only $4.99 for Zoom this month. And if you email that to the patient, you need their consent to use their information you have about them being a patient, their PII, email address, name, et cetera, to market to them. You need their permission to do that. That is something your notice of privacy practices typically gives you, is it gives you that permission because it will have a statement in there about we may use your information to market services or products that we feel would be beneficial for your dental health, happiness, et cetera. That's in your notice of privacy practice. And if it's not, it definitely should be, because if it's not in there and you send that patient an email marketing a Zoom promo or a don't forget to use your benefits by the end of the year email, you're violating HIPAA without having that marketing clause in your NPP. So NPP has a lot of things. Let's talk about that number one. Number one, 90% of the time when somebody says, we have our patients, all new patients sign a HIPAA form, how often does the HIPAA form have to be updated? What you're talking about 90% of the time is the acknowledgement of receipt of notice of privacy practices. That is the acknowledgement that the patient has had the opportunity to read or receive a copy of your office NPP. NPP is Notice of Privacy Practices. And 90% of the time when people say, sign the HIPAA form, sign the HIPAA form, it is the acknowledgement of receipt. Just saying, it's the patient just acknowledging they had the opportunity to receive and or read your office's Notice of Privacy Practices, because you are required to present it to every patient. As a covered entity, you have to present it to every single patient that you have. You have to display it in your office. It has to be displayed in your office. So hopefully everybody has a Notice of Privacy Practices hanging up in their office, in the waiting room, at the front door, somewhere where every patient can see it. You now are going to have to update that copy that's hanging in your office because of these changes that are coming in right now. It has to be displayed in your office. It has to be prominently posted on your website. And this is something that every now and then, once every couple years, some attorney will get a bug up his butt and will decide he's going to go to 100,000 different dental office websites, not see their Notice of Privacy Practices, and then send you a letter saying, you're not in compliance with HIPAA because your NPP's not posted on your website. I'm going to sue you for not following HIPAA, even though I'm not a patient. Can they do that? Yes. Is it slimy? Absolutely. But it's also legal and they're allowed to do it because you're violating HIPAA law. Even though they're not a patient, it's still a violation of their rights, and then they'll file a complaint, and it's a whole thing. And it happens once every couple years, and everybody will post about it. They got this letter, and some people will pay it and some people won't. And typically the people that pay it are enough that that attorney says, I'm not filing any complaints. I just made $100,000. I'm good to go. But has to be prominently posted on your website. You have to offer patients a paper copy. You have to have a copy in the office for them to read, and there has to be copies available for them to take home if they request it. I will say, I am the only person I know who actually, when you go to a doctor's office, asks for a copy of their NPP to take home and read. I do it every time I go to a new doctor, every time they make me sign an acknowledgement, because that acknowledgement has to be signed by new patients. And anytime you make a change to your NPP. And that's why this is such a big deal now, because every covered entity in the country has to change their NPP before February 16th, which means from the moment you change it until every patient has signed that acknowledgement of receipt, every patient's going to have to sign that acknowledgement of receipt. Now, here's what I will tell you. If a patient refuses to sign it, that's okay. You can still treat the patient. You write on the acknowledgement of receipt, patient refused to sign, patient was offered copy of NPP and refused. Scan it in and you're covered. Patient doesn't have to sign it, but the office has to make a good faith effort to get an acknowledgement signed. If the patient refuses, that's okay. You write, patient refused to sign, refused copy of NPP, scan it into their paperwork, and you tried. You made a good faith attempt to get that acknowledgement of receipt signed. So now let's talk about what the changes are. There are two different changes. Number one, there's a change to, and something your Notice of Privacy Practices has to address, is reproductive rights. And somebody last night said, how does that affect dentistry? Here's the problem. Your notice of privacy practices doesn't follow dental law. It follows federal HIPAA requirements. You, as a dentist, are a physician. Under the CMS definition, you are a physician. Under the Office of Civil Rights and Department of Health and Human Services definition, if you submit a covered transaction electronically, you are a covered entity, which makes you have to follow HIPAA law. What your specialty is as a physician doesn't matter. Whether you're a chiropractor, whether you're a thoracic surgeon, whether you're a brain surgeon, whether you're a dentist, whether you are in Colorado and you're a hygienist that has their own independent practice, it doesn't matter. If you are a covered entity, you have to follow these rules. Your specialty doesn't matter. So yes, you're going to have to put, as a dental office, on your notice of privacy practices, the new statements addressing reproductive rights. Does it have anything to do with your teeth? No. But you still have to put it on there because it's a federal requirement. Your specialty doesn't matter. I don't know where this idea came from that, well, we're dentists, so we don't have to follow this law and this law and this law. The locum tenens rules don't apply to us. The overbilling rules don't apply to us. The good faith estimate rule doesn't apply to us. It does. They all apply. You're a physician and your specialty doesn't matter. You have to follow the same rules. So yes, you're going to have to address reproductive rights in your notice of privacy practices. You also are going to have to address the substance use disorder, or you'll see it referred to if you Google what are the 2026 requirements for a notice of privacy practices. One of the things it's going to talk about is SUD, S-U-D, and that is the substance use disorder, because that's another requirement for 2026. You have to talk about how your office will not release information about substance use or abuse that's in your medical record without either the patient's consent or a court order. That is one of the things, substance use disorder, substance abuse, is one of the things that has now received extra protection over and above the normal HIPAA stuff. Because a lot of people don't realize this. Under HIPAA law, if an investigating agency, Children and Youth Services, the police department, the state police, the Secret Service, the FBI, if they walk into your office and they tell you, I need this patient's record, I don't have a warrant, I don't need a warrant, it's part of an active investigation, and I need this patient's record, HIPAA law requires you to release that record if it is part of an investigation without a subpoena, without a warrant, without anything. An official just has to tell you it's part of an ongoing investigation or an active investigation, and you have to release that information. Part of HIPAA law. However, substance use disorder or substance abuse that is noted in the chart is excluded from that. It has a higher level of protection than the rest of the patient's chart. And you can retract or rescind that information from that chart when you give it over to the investigating party. You can rescind that without the patient's consent or a court order. Once you have the patient's consent to share it, you can share it. Once you have a court order requiring you to share it, now you have to share it. But whereas everything else, it's kind of just free range. Here you go, you can have it. Substance abuse, substance use disorder has a higher level of protection. So it requires court order or patient's consent. That has to be added to your notice of privacy practices. Doesn't matter, but I'm a dentist. I don't get involved in substance abuse. Doesn't matter. You're a covered entity. You're not a dentist. You're a covered entity. You have to do this. You have to update this. It has to be done. So, with that said, I'm going to put links to what the requirements are from HHS, from the Department of Health and Human Services, from a variety of sources. I'm going to put them in the comment section down below. Make sure you are updating your notice of privacy practices. One of the required or mandatory languages on that NPP is what's called the patient's bill of rights. They have a right to receive a notice of privacy practices. They have a right to access PHI, their PHI. They have to be able to get copies, billing, medical records, x-rays, anything in the designated record set. That's one of their bill of rights. They have the right to request restrictions. They can place a restriction on there. This is what the HIPAA disclosure restriction form is that some people call the do not bill to insurance form. They have a right to request restrictions and a right to rescind restrictions. It's one of their bill of rights guaranteed under HIPAA law. They have a right to request confidential communications. So they can say to you, do not leave voicemails, do not send me texts, do not do this. You can only speak to me live. You can only send me printed mail. They have a right to request the type of communication they get. They have a right to amend their PHI. They have a right to an accounting of disclosures. Patients can request a list of PHI disclosures. And you know what that is? That is a list of every single time somebody in your office either accessed their PHI, looked at it, or sent it out to someone else. Every time you've submitted an insurance claim, every time you've mailed a letter if you're an oral surgeon, every time you've mailed a letter to a general dentist saying, thank you for referring, John. We did an extraction on number 3, tolerated procedure well. That's a disclosure. And you have to keep an accounting of those. And the patient has the right to request a accounting of disclosures. When and why was my information accessed every time it was accessed? We looked at the ledger in order to confirm your balance. We looked at we sent the claim form to insurance to get payment. We sent a letter to your general dentist for this, blah, blah, blah. That is a disclosure, and you have to maintain a list of those for every patient. They have a right to get that list, that accounting of disclosures. And finally, they have the right to complain. Your NPP has to tell them not only how they can file or who they can contact within your office to file a complaint, but it also must provide the information to the Office of Civil Rights, OCR, which is part of the Department of Health and Human Services, HHS, must include that. Here is how you contact HHS or the OCR to file a complaint against us. You have to have that on your NPP. It's a requirement. Again, you have to update your NPP that there must contain an explanation on how your practice uses or discloses substance use disorder information on there. You may say, we don't gather that data. And saying we don't gather or maintain substance use disorder is a perfectly acceptable update to your NPP, but you can't not do it. If you don't gather it, now here's the thing, if you don't gather it, if you have a patient who says, yeah, I have all these teeth because I have meth mouth because I was addicted to methamphetamines and I this and that and blah, 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 blah. If your NPP says you don't document or store it, you damn well better not document or store it when that patient comes in and tells you they have meth mouth and why. Don't document it because you said you don't. So what I would say is we may document and maintain it, but we will not send it out to anyone outside of having your permission or a court order. That is what I would do. But you have to do that. And then the reproductive rights also have to be updated. And, everybody's saying, well, just tell me what to say. What do I have to put on there? Where's the sample form? HIPAA doesn't work that way. HIPAA doesn't say, here's what we want you to say. HIPAA says, here's what we want you to address. Now, you address it however you like, but you have to address it. Reproductive rights, you very well may not document that, but you may, because the patient may put on their health history that they're going through IVF or that they are taking this pill to increase fertility. Now you have documented something that's covered by the reproductive rights thing. Requires, again, a court order. It's a whole thing. It's that elevated level of protection. So I can't tell you, here's what to say. I can tell you, here's what you have to address. Now address it. You choose how you address it. But remember, you are welcome to say in your NPP, we do not store, maintain, or disclose information about substance abuse. But if your NPP says that, you better make sure you don't. When a patient says, I had meth mouth, I was addicted to this, I was addicted to cocaine, you can't document it because your NPP says you don't store it. So figure out how you want to address it. I'm happy to offer advice or say, yes, I think that looks good. If this is what you want to say, if you want to send me over what you come up with, but you have to address it, whether it's we don't do it or we do, you have to address both the SUD, the substance use disorder, and the reproductive rights in your new NPP. It has to be done and updated by February 16th. On February 16th, that is the day that you will update your NPP. If not before, I would start right away. And every patient who walks in the door from that moment forward now has to sign a new acknowledgement of receipt because your NPP has changed. Update the one hanging in your office, update the one on your website, do it before February 16th, and then until every patient has signed the new acknowledgement, every patient that walks in the door for the first time after February 16th has to sign that new acknowledgement. Even if they signed one in December as a new patient, if they're coming back in May for their 6-month recall, they have to sign a new one because your NPP has changed since they signed the last one. Hopefully that helps. It clears it up. I know this was a much longer live video than normal, but as always, ask any questions you have down in the comment section below. Obviously, I'm here. Everybody have a great day. Have a wonderful Wednesday, a great rest of your week, and I will see you guys, hopefully from my normal car again, on Friday morning for our next Drive Live video.